Push beyond limits. Rise above the ordinary. Rise beyond limits.
You are not tired, you are not overwhelmed, you are not stuck. You have simply allowed your mind to become weak, and a weak mind will always create a weak life. That is the truth most people spend their entire lives avoiding, because it is easier to blame circumstances than to confront yourself. Easier to say you need motivation than to admit you lack discipline. Easier to scroll, to watch, to talk, than to act. But none of that builds anything. None of that moves you forward. None of that changes who you are, because change does not come from comfort. It comes from pressure. It comes from resistance. It comes from the moments when everything inside you says stop, and you choose to continue anyway. That is where strength is built, not in easy days, not in perfect conditions, but in the struggle you try so hard to avoid. Look at your life, look at your habits, look at how you spend your time when no one is watching. That is your reality, not your intentions. Not your plans, not your words, your actions, repeated daily, quietly, relentlessly. That is what defines you, and right now your actions are telling a story of hesitation, a story of distraction, a story of starting and stopping. Again and again and again you feel the weight of it, that frustration. That quiet voice reminding you that you could be more, but you are not. Not yet. And deep down you know why. It is not lack of opportunity. It is not lack of knowledge. It is lack of control. Control over your thoughts. Control over your impulses. Control over your decisions. Because every day you negotiate with weakness. You say just 5 more minutes. You say I'll start tomorrow. You say I don't feel like it. And every time you listen, you reinforce the same pattern. You train your mind to quit. You teach it that comfort comes first. That effort is optional. That discipline can wait. And slowly, without even realizing it, you become someone who cannot trust themselves. That is the real cost. Not failure, not setbacks, but the loss of self-respect. Because when you break promises to yourself repeatedly, something inside you starts to fade. Your confidence weakens, your belief erodes. Your identity fractures, and once that happens, everything becomes harder. Decisions feel heavier. Action feels distant, progress feels impossible, but here is the shift. The moment everything changes, you stop negotiating, you stop explaining, you stop waiting, and you decide not once but every single day that no matter how you feel, you will act. That no matter how uncomfortable it gets, you will continue. That no matter how slow the progress, you will persist, because discipline is not intensity, it is consistency. It is showing up when it is boring, when it is repetitive, when it feels like nothing is happening, and doing the work anyway. That is what builds power. That is what builds identity. That is what transforms you from someone who talks into someone who executes. And once that shift happens, everything begins to change. Not overnight, not instantly, but steadily. Like a force that cannot be stopped. Because now you are no longer controlled by how you feel. You are controlled by what you choose, and that is where the stoic warrior is born. And once that part of you wakes up, there is no going back, because you finally understand something most people never will. You are not tired. You are resisting the very actions that would set you free. That tension you feel, that weight in your chest, that constant pull toward distraction, it is not exhaustion, it is conflict. A war between who you are and who you refuse to become. Because becoming stronger requires something most people avoid. It requires discomfort, not once. Not occasionally, but daily. And your mind has been trained to escape it, to run the moment things get hard, to seek relief instead of growth, to choose easy instead of necessary. So every time you sit down to work, your mind searches for an exit. Every time you face resistance, it offers you comfort. Every time you get close to discipline, it whispers an excuse. And if you listen even once, it wins. Not because the excuse is powerful, but because repetition makes it permanent. That is how weakness is built, quietly, gradually, over time, one skipped action. One delayed decision. One moment of avoidance at a time. Until one day, you wake up and realize you've built a life around escaping effort. And now effort feels unbearable. But understand this clearly. The pain you avoid today becomes the limitation you live with tomorrow. Every shortcut becomes a barrier. Every excuse becomes a chain. Every delay becomes distance between you and the life you claim you want. So the question is simple. How much longer are you willing to trade your future for comfort? How much longer will you let temporary ease control permanent outcomes? Because nothing changes until you change your relationship with discomfort. Right now, you see it as something negative. Something to avoid, something to escape, but the Stoic warrior sees it differently. Discomfort is not the enemy. It is the signal that you are exactly where you need to be, at the edge. At the point where growth begins, where most people turn back, where most people quit. That is your opportunity, because if you can stay there just a little longer than everyone else, you win. Not instantly, not visibly, but inevitably, because discipline compounds. Every time you act despite resistance, you strengthen control. Every time you ignore distraction, you sharpen focus. Every time you keep going, you build momentum, and momentum is everything. It turns effort into identity. It turns actions into habits. It turns struggle into strength. But it starts with a decision. A real decision, not one made out of emotion, not one made out of temporary motivation, but one made out of clarity. You decide that your feelings are no longer in charge. You decide that comfort is no longer the priority. You decide that excuses are no longer acceptable, and from that moment forward, you act accordingly. No matter what, no matter how you feel. No matter how hard it gets, because you understand something now, discipline is not something you have. It is something you practice every day, in small moments, in invisible choices. In the quiet battles no one else sees. That is where the transformation happens, not in big breakthroughs, but in consistent control. And at first, it will feel unnatural, uncomfortable, heavy. Because you are breaking patterns that have been repeated for years. But that is the process. That is the cost of growth. You are not here to stay the same. You are here to evolve, to rise. To become something stronger, something sharper, something more disciplined. And that requires letting go of who you've been, the version of you that hesitates, that delays. That negotiates with weakness. That version cannot come with you, so you leave it behind. One decision at a time, one action at a time, one disciplined moment at a time. Until eventually something shifts. You start to trust yourself again. Your actions align with your intentions, your effort becomes consistent. Your mind becomes quieter, stronger, more controlled. And suddenly, what once felt impossible becomes standard. That is the power of discipline. It doesn't just change what you do, it changes who you are. And once that identity is built, everything else follows. Because now, you are no longer reacting to life. You are directing it, and that is when the real separation begins, not when you feel ready. Not when everything aligns, but when you decide that excuses are no longer part of your language. Because understand this, the gap between where you are and where you want to be is not talent. It is not intelligence, it is not luck. It is standards. What you tolerate, you become. What you accept defines you. And right now, whether you admit it or not, you have been tolerating inconsistency. You have been accepting distraction. You have been allowing yourself to operate below your potential. Not because you can't do more, but because you haven't demanded more from yourself. That changes now. Because the Stoic warrior does not wait for external pressure. They create it internally. They set a standard so high that average behavior becomes uncomfortable. That wasted time feels wrong. That excuses feel unacceptable. That hesitation feels like weakness. And when you reach that point, discipline is no longer something you force. It becomes something you live. But to get there, you must confront something difficult. You must confront the truth. Not the version you tell others, not the version you post, but the real version. The one revealed in your habits, your routines, your choices when no one is watching. That is who you are. And if that truth makes you uncomfortable, good. Because discomfort is the starting point of transformation. It means you see the gap. It means you recognize the distance between who you are and who you could be. Most people never reach that point. They distract themselves, they numb themselves, they avoid reflection at all costs. Because facing yourself requires responsibility, and responsibility requires action. But you are not most people. You are here because something inside you is tired of repeating the same cycle. Starting, stopping, promising, breaking, regretting, and then doing it all over again. That cycle ends when you stop negotiating with it, when you stop giving yourself options. Because options create hesitation, and hesitation kills momentum. You don't need more choices, you need fewer, clear, non-negotiable. You wake up, you act, you plan, you execute. You start, you finish. No debate, no delay, no discussion. That is how control is built, through simplicity, through repetition. through discipline that does not depend on how you feel. Because feelings are temporary, they change constantly. They rise and fall, they pull you in different directions, but standards remain. And when your actions are tied to standards instead of emotions, everything stabilizes. You become consistent, reliable, focused. You stop wasting time deciding whether or not to act, because the decision has already been made. That is power, real power, the ability to act without internal resistance, the ability to move forward without needing motivation, the ability to execute regardless of circumstances. And once you reach that level, you become dangerous. Because now nothing can stop you except yourself. And you've already removed that obstacle. You've eliminated hesitation. You've cut out excuses. You've replaced comfort with purpose. So now every day becomes an opportunity, not to feel good, but to get better, to sharpen your mind, to strengthen your discipline, to reinforce your identity, because identity is everything. If you see yourself as someone who quits, you will quit. If you see yourself as someone who hesitates, you will hesitate. But if you see yourself as someone who executes, someone who follows through, someone who does what needs to be done, no matter what, then your actions will reflect that, automatically. Effortlessly, relentlessly. That is the shift from forcing discipline to becoming disciplined, from chasing results to embodying the process, from hoping for change to creating it daily. And once that shift is locked in, there is no more starting over, no more falling back, no more questioning whether you can do it, because now it is simply who you are, a person who acts, a person who builds, a person who refuses to settle, and that identity changes everything, and that identity changes everything. Because once you become someone who follows through, the world starts to respond differently. Opportunities begin to appear, not by chance, but by alignment. Because disciplined people see what others miss. They act when others hesitate, they build while others wait, and over time that difference compounds, quietly, relentlessly, until the gap between you and everyone else becomes impossible to ignore. But understand this. The outside world is not where the real victory happens. The real victory is internal. It is the moment you stop doubting yourself, the moment you stop second-guessing your ability to execute, the moment you know, without needing proof, that you will do what you said you would do. That level of certainty is rare, because it is earned, built through repetition, forged through discipline, strengthened through consistency, and protected through silence. Because once you reach that level, you no longer feel the need to explain yourself. You no longer need validation. You no longer seek approval. You move differently. Calm, focused, intentional. There is no rush, no panic, no desperation, just controlled execution, step by step, day by day. That is the mindset of the stoic warrior, unshaken by external noise, unmoved by temporary emotions. Unstoppable because they have mastered themselves. And self-mastery is the highest form of power, not controlling others, not proving anything to the world, but controlling your own thoughts, your own actions, your own direction, because once you control those, everything else becomes secondary. Think about it. What has been holding you back? Is it truly your circumstances? Or is it your reactions to them? Is it truly your environment? Or is it your inability to stay consistent within it? Most people wait for better conditions, less stress, more time, more support. But those conditions rarely come, and even when they do, they don't last. So if your progress depends on perfection, you will always stay stuck. But if your progress depends on discipline, then nothing can stop you, because discipline does not require perfect conditions. It only requires a decision you reinforce daily. Not with words, but with action. That is the difference. Anyone can say they are committed. Anyone can claim they want more, but very few are willing to prove it, not once, but consistently. Over time, without recognition, without shortcuts, without giving up. That is what separates the average from the elite, not bursts of effort, but sustained execution. And sustained execution requires something deeper than motivation. It requires identity. Because when discipline becomes part of who you are, you don't need to force it. You don't wake up and debate whether or not to act. You act because that is what you do, just like breathing, just like thinking. It becomes automatic, and that is when everything accelerates. Because now your energy is no longer wasted on internal conflict. You are not fighting yourself anymore. You are aligned. Your thoughts support your actions. Your actions reinforce your identity. Your identity drives your future. That is the cycle, and once it is established, it becomes unstoppable. But it starts small, with simple decisions. Do the work, finish the task. Ignore the distraction, stay focused, repeat, again and again and again, until discipline is no longer something you try to maintain, but something that defines you. Because once it defines you, there is no room left for weakness, no space for excuses, no tolerance for inconsistency. You become precise, efficient, relentless, and most importantly, dependable. To yourself, and that is the foundation of everything. Because if you cannot depend on yourself, nothing else matters. No plan will work, no goal will stick, no vision will become reality. But once you can, once your word to yourself becomes law, then progress becomes inevitable. Not fast, not flashy, but certain. And certainty is what turns effort into results. And results into a life most people only talk about. But talking is easy. Action is not. Most people fill their days with noise, social media, excuses, distractions, because it feels productive. It feels like movement, but it's all illusion, a mirage that masks inaction. They convince themselves they are trying while their potential rots in silence. You will not fall into that trap. Not anymore, not if you want to become the stoic warrior. The first step is brutal honesty. Look at your habits, look at your routines, look at where your energy is going. No judgment, no excuses. Just observation, because awareness is the precursor to mastery. You cannot change what you refuse to see. You cannot grow where you are blind, and most people never see themselves clearly. They are too busy justifying failure, too busy blaming circumstances, too busy waiting for motivation that will never come. Motivation is fleeting, discipline lasts. Discipline is a decision repeated in silence, reinforced in action, sharpened by consistency. And when discipline becomes who you are, you stop negotiating with life. You stop debating whether to act. You act because that is your nature. That requires sacrifice. Not once, not occasionally, but consistently. You will sacrifice comfort. You will sacrifice approval. You will sacrifice fleeting pleasures that serve no purpose. Because the stoic warrior understands that short-term ease is the enemy of long-term victory. Every time you push past fatigue, every time you ignore distraction, every time you do what is hard instead of what is easy, you are training. You are strengthening the mental muscles most people refuse to build. You are creating leverage for yourself. Invisible, silent, but powerful beyond measure. This is not about recognition. It is not about applause, it is about results. Real results. Results that cannot be stolen. Results that speak for themselves. And the truth is simple. Results are not given. They are earned. Hour by hour, day by day. In the moments nobody is watching. In the choices nobody notices. In the work nobody applauds. That is the arena where the stoic warrior thrives. Where others complain, you execute. Where others hesitate, you persist. Where others retreat, you advance. It is a lonely path, yes, but it is the path that leads to mastery, that leads to freedom. That leads to control over yourself and your destiny. Because the moment you no longer need validation, the moment you no longer seek approval, the moment you no longer negotiate with weakness, something shifts, something fundamental. You become untouchable, not in a physical sense, not in a boastful sense, but in the sense that nothing outside of you can derail your progress, nothing outside can sway your commitment. Nothing outside can dictate your future. And once you reach that state, the world reacts. Doors open, opportunities emerge. Your mind sees solutions where others see problems. Your actions draw results where others see chance. But none of it is magic. None of it is luck. It is the cumulative effect of quiet, relentless, disciplined execution. And it all started with one decision: to stop negotiating with yourself, to stop tolerating weakness, to stop waiting for permission to become great. From that decision, everything else is inevitable. Because the world does not reward talkers, it does not honor intention, it does not celebrate dreams that are untested. The world rewards action. The world responds to those who do what others only think about. Those who act when hesitation whispers, wait. Those who persist when comfort screams, stop. The stoic warrior understands this intuitively. They do not need external pressure. They do not rely on inspiration. They rely on standards, on internal rules that cannot be broken. Every morning they wake, they check themselves against those standards. Every hour they act, they measure themselves against them. and every night they reflect on whether they were faithful to the code they have set. Most people avoid this. They avoid reflection. They avoid accountability. They distract themselves with shallow victories. A like, a comment, a small acknowledgement, but those are not victories, they are illusions, fleeting, temporary, empty. They leave the soul hungry and restless, searching for meaning that can only be earned in silence and effort. And effort is hard. It is lonely. It is grueling. It is boring. It requires consistency over brilliance, repetition over novelty, restraint over impulse. But that is the currency of mastery. That is the only way to turn a weak mind into an unbreakable one. That is the path that separates the elite from the average. You cannot cheat this process. You cannot skip steps. You cannot delegate your discipline. The work belongs to you and you alone. Every action you take or fail to take becomes part of your identity. Every decision reinforces the person you are becoming. Every excuse chips away at your potential. That is why it is so crucial to embrace discomfort, to love struggle, to see pain not as an enemy but as a teacher, because resistance is the forge that tempers character, the heat that purifies focus, the force that aligns mind and body toward relentless execution. And the remarkable truth is this: the more you embrace it, the easier it becomes. Not the task itself, it never becomes easy, but the ability to act regardless of circumstances, the ability to focus when distractions scream, the ability to persist when your mind wants to quit, the ability to win silently in every moment that others waste. Every small choice compounds, every disciplined moment strengthens. Every day you follow through, you are one day closer to the person you were meant to be, one step further from hesitation, 1 inch nearer to mastery, and mastery is freedom, freedom from doubt, freedom from distraction, freedom from the tyranny of emotions that weaken ordinary people, freedom to act with clarity, precision, and unstoppable force. But freedom requires vigilance. It requires constancy. You cannot allow yourself to drift back into the comfortable habits of the crowd. You cannot allow fleeting pleasure to steal momentum, because momentum is everything. Once it is lost, it takes longer to rebuild than you ever imagine. So the Stoic warrior acts daily, relentlessly, not for recognition, not for praise, not for applause. They act for one reason only: to honor the person they are becoming, to prove to themselves, day after day, that they are capable of more than the world allows them to believe. And that finally is where power begins, not in circumstance, not in opportunity, not in fortune, but in disciplined, consistent, intentional action. That is how you transform weakness into strength, hesitation into decisiveness, average into elite. And the transformation begins with the choice to act, because action is the bridge between thought and reality, between desire and achievement, between who you are now and who you are becoming. Every movement, every effort, every step taken when the mind screams to stop, that is where the real work happens. That is where character is forged. That is where the Stoic warrior is born. Most people do not understand this. They confuse movement with progress. They think planning, talking, or thinking counts as action. But true action is doing what must be done, consistently, without hesitation, without complaint, without external reward. It is showing up when no one is watching, when no one cares, when nothing seems to be happening. That is where momentum is created. That is where the invisible foundation of greatness is built. Your mind is not your enemy, but it is fragile, untrained, and easily distracted. Every thought of doubt, every craving for comfort, every rationalization to postpone effort, that is the opposition you must master. You will not win by waiting for inspiration. You will win by acting while others hesitate, by persisting while others rest, by embracing the grind that nobody wants. Discipline is not a feeling, it is a practice. A constant application of deliberate effort in the face of resistance. It is choosing the long-term reward over the short-term comfort every single day, and it compounds. Every action reinforces your identity. Every decision strengthens your control. Every moment you act despite discomfort, you become more. There will be pain. There will be frustration. There will be doubt. That is inevitable, but pain is temporary. Discomfort is fleeting. Weakness is optional. And the Stoic warrior thrives not in the absence of adversity, but in its midst. They do not wait for the storm to pass. They learn to navigate it with unwavering focus, precise execution, and absolute resolve. Every day is a test. Every choice is a statement. Every action is a declaration of who you are. Are you someone who retreats when life demands effort? Or are you someone who stands, unwavering, persistent, and relentless? The answer defines your trajectory. The answer separates the ordinary from the exceptional. You are being measured in ways you cannot yet see, by moments that feel insignificant, by choices that seem small, by the silent hours where nobody notices your struggle. That is where your future is being written. That is where your reputation with yourself is forged. Do not waste it. Do not negotiate with it. Do not delay the inevitable. Decide now that comfort is no longer your master. Decide that excuses will no longer dictate your actions. Decide that you will rise daily, relentlessly, until your potential is fully realized. Because the world will not wait for you. Circumstances will not bend in your favor. Time will not pause. Opportunity does not linger. You must take it. You must act. You must dominate the moments that define your life. And every time you do, you reinforce the most important law of all. You are the one in control, not the world, not others, not chance. You, that is the essence of the Stoic warrior. That is the discipline that transforms. That is the force that turns ordinary effort into extraordinary results. And it all begins with the choice to act, because choices define reality. Every small decision accumulates into a life either of mastery or mediocrity. Every moment you obey distraction, you shrink. Every moment you resist it, you expand. Every time you prioritize action over comfort, you reinforce the foundation of your future self. That is the invisible architecture of greatness. Most people never see it. They live in chaos, reacting to impulse, drifting with circumstance. They blame the world for their stagnation. They tell themselves stories about why they cannot, why they are tired, why they need permission to move forward. But stories do not build empires. Stories do not create results. Stories are excuses that pacify the mind and weaken the soul. You will not become exceptional by avoiding difficulty. You will not build discipline by indulging comfort. You will not earn respect by waiting for approval. You will earn nothing, gain nothing, become nothing if you continue to negotiate with mediocrity. The Stoic warrior thrives because they see the truth clearly. They see resistance as opportunity. They see struggle as the forge of their identity. They see distraction as the enemy and focus as the weapon. Every choice, every action, every moment of self-mastery is deliberate. Nothing is left to chance. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is accidental. Discipline is not sexy. It does not post well on social media. It does not generate applause, but it works. Quietly, consistently, relentlessly. It accumulates day by day until the results are undeniable, until your identity aligns with your intention, until your life becomes a testament to unseen effort, uncompromising standards, and silent persistence. Pain will come, frustration will strike, doubt will whisper. That is inevitable. But mastery is not built in ease. It is built in resistance. It is built in repetition. It is built in the moments when your mind says stop and your will says continue. You must learn to embrace that friction, to seek it even, because every time you act through resistance, your mind grows sharper, your focus becomes clearer, your control becomes absolute. You no longer react to circumstance, you dictate it. You no longer wait for opportunity, you create it. You no longer depend on external approval, you command your own life. And as you continue down this path, a remarkable thing happens. You begin to trust yourself. Deeply, unquestionably, irrevocably, your promises to yourself become sacred. Your word becomes law. Your actions become unstoppable. And when the world tests you, when distraction calls, when doubt threatens, you do not falter. You respond with precision, with consistency, with inevitability. This is the power of sustained action, the power of invisible effort, the power of the Stoic warrior. And remember, greatness is not a sudden explosion. It is a steady accumulation of choices, repeated relentlessly, without attention, without applause, without delay. Every disciplined action compounds. Every silent victory strengthens. Every moment you resist weakness makes you untouchable. And the path is simple, though not easy. Act, persist, repeat. Strengthen your mind, train your will, refine your focus. Build habits that cannot be broken. Build standards that cannot be compromised. Build identity that cannot be shaken. Because in the end, the measure of your life is not in words spoken, but in actions taken. And it all begins with the choice to act. Because your life is the sum of the decisions you refuse to postpone. Every delay, every compromise, every moment you surrender to comfort accumulates into stagnation. And every deliberate choice to push forward, to act despite doubt, to rise when others fall, accumulates into mastery. That is the invisible architecture of the extraordinary. Most people live in reactive patterns. They respond to events rather than create them. They chase pleasure, avoid pain, and measure themselves against temporary emotions. They seek shortcuts and validation, hoping the world will reward their intention instead of their execution. But intention without action is meaningless. Without execution, dreams remain fantasies. Goals remain words. Potential remains unclaimed. You will not ascend by following the crowd. You will not grow by imitating those who quit when difficulty appears. You will ascend by confronting your limits, embracing discomfort, and operating when others choose ease. That is the law of discipline. That is the code of the Stoic warrior. Focus is your weapon. Clarity is your armor. Relentless action is your method. And consistency is the invisible force that multiplies everything you do. Small efforts repeated daily, invisible to the world, compound into unstoppable momentum. That is how mastery is built. That is how control becomes absolute. Expect resistance. Expect doubt. Expect failure, not as obstacles, but as instruments of growth. Each challenge is a mirror showing the gap between who you are and who you must become. Each discomfort is the forge for a stronger mind. Each moment you refuse to yield is a declaration of your emerging identity. Discipline is not a one-time victory. It is not a flashy achievement. It is a lifestyle, a constant reinforcement of your standards, a relentless commitment to act even when the world is indifferent, even when your mind protests, even when progress feels invisible. Because invisibility is the testing ground of greatness. The people who succeed are not the lucky, they are not the most talented, they are not the loudest. They are those who master themselves when no one is watching. They act when others hesitate. They persist when others retreat. They build when others talk. That is the Stoic warrior's edge. You are building the same edge. Every moment you choose discipline over distraction, action over delay, growth over comfort, you reinforce the identity that cannot be shaken. You are creating leverage that compounds faster than opportunity. You are becoming someone who moves through life with inevitability, and inevitability is powerful. It cannot be stopped. It cannot be bribed, it cannot be debated, it commands results, it demands respect. It transforms your life silently, relentlessly, and irreversibly. So stand firm. Focus your mind, train your will. Reinforce your identity, pursue relentless action. Build momentum that cannot be denied. Protect your standards, and never negotiate with weakness, because greatness is not given. It is earned through unyielding action, and it all begins with the choice to act. This is the final moment, the summit of your effort, the culmination of every disciplined choice you have made and every obstacle you have endured. Now is not the time to hesitate. Now is not the time to question your ability. Now is the time to move with clarity, precision, and unstoppable intent. Every second you delay, every moment you doubt is energy stolen from the person you are meant to become. You will feel fear. You will feel resistance. You will feel the pull to retreat, to seek comfort, to justify inaction. That is natural. That is the human condition. But the Stoic warrior does not negotiate with nature. They harness it. They take that fear and mold it into fuel. They take that resistance and convert it into power. They take that doubt and crush it with action. Remember, the world does not reward potential. It does not honor dreams. It does not remember those who talk. It rewards execution, results, relentless forward motion. And every choice you make now, every action you take, is an investment in an identity that cannot be shaken. Your life is forged in the small moments no one sees. The silent hours of repetition, the invisible victories, the choices to do what is hard because it is necessary. This is where the edge is sharpened. This is where mastery is built. This is where the Stoic warrior emerges. And now, you stand at the precipice of your own transformation. Everything you have done, everything you have resisted, everything you have endured has prepared you for this moment. There is no shortcut. There is no external validation required. There is only action, relentless, uncompromising, inevitable action, So act, persist, execute, and let every decision reflect the identity you have forged in silence. Let every choice honor the person you are becoming. Let every moment of discipline accumulate into results that cannot be denied, cannot be stopped, and cannot be ignored. Because this is the ultimate truth. The person who acts when others hesitate, who persists when others retreat, who builds when others talk, that person cannot be defeated. That person is unstoppable. That person is powerful beyond measure. That person is free. And freedom is the reward of discipline. Mastery is the reward of consistency. Victory is the reward of relentless execution. And all of it begins with one thing, the choice to act.